Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Thank you for coming out. I want to welcome you to the Sweet Home Missionary Baptist Church. I'm the pastor, Marlon C. Mack Sr., and it is our pleasure to open our doors to you all for doing such great work in the community. We believe that the Bible says that my people perish for a lack of knowledge, and the reason that I open the doors to have G.A.R.D come in and present their Green Steel community meeting here is because I believe that our people are not given the information that's needed for them to make informed decisions. And when they do get information, it's often biased and skewed. And so we wanted to hear both sides. And then they can make their own decision. So thank you all for coming out tonight. I want to thank G.A.R.D for coming and considering us as a place to come and meet. And at this time, we're going to bring now our Green Steel Committee co-chair, Councilwoman Lori Latham.
Thank you, Pastor Mack. I was sharing with Pastor Mack the last time I was in this church. My daughter had her piano recital here. I know Max, I know Carruthers, and I'm just very honored to be here. And I'm so grateful for the influence that Pastor Mack, this church, and his family has had on our community over the years. So thank you so much, Pastor Mack. I am the Green Steel Committee co-chair. I also represent the 1st District on the City Council, and I'm currently serving as the City Council President. I'm excited, though, to be here to talk about green steel. Yes. I've been sharing, we can make green steel. Yes. We can have a steel-making industry that does not kill us. So that's why I'm very excited about our community meetings, as well as just all the things, all the actions, all the information that we've been giving as a part of G.A.R.D through our Green Steel Committee. It is my pleasure to introduce, there she goes, Beryl Fitzpatrick. We are going to show the CBS News segment on steel mill pollution. Who has not seen it? You all are in for, it's hard to call it a treat, but after you watch it, I promise you'll be different. You won't be the same after you see this. So I'm excited to watch that. And Ms. Fitzpatrick is here. Raise your hand. Hi. So is it ready to go? Or do the people have to start?
It's starting.
Here it comes.
Started.
Keep watching if your recent car accident was not your fault. Because
Nothing wrong with a commercial.
30 minutes from Chicago, there's a city that has some of the dirtiest air in the nation. It's home to 3 steel mills, including the largest in the nation and one of America's largest black populations. In Gary, Indiana, residents who've been breathing in that toxic air say they feel like they've been overlooked and neglected by those who can help clean it up. CBS News Chicago investigative reporter Tara Molina has been covering this story. She joins us now. Tara, good to see you. So what did you find in your investigation?
Yeah, good to see you. These steel plants have been an economic lifeline for this area for decades. U.S. Steel, which owns the largest facility in Gary, maintains its work as essential to the health of America's economy. And they say they have systems in place to comply with environmental regulations. But what we found, people in the fight for their lives, and medical researchers getting closer to a direct causal link between pollutants and some cancers. As the wind blows through her hometown of Gary, Beryl Fitzpatrick takes it in with a deep breath. One she no longer takes for granted.
Nobody wants to hear you have cancer.
With Beryl, you can hear her cancer as she speaks. She's been battling stage 3 tongue cancer. The air in her own backyard could be playing a role.
Good morning to you.
It's what Dr. Kirsten Stenson, who heads the head and neck cancer program at Rush Medical Center, told Beryl.
It's almost certain that her place of residence with the high pollution and other industrial output contributed to her cancer.
Pollutants you can see and tiny particulates you can't come from different types of industry in the Gary region. But of all the industry, one releases the most, EPA records show. These steel production plants. 7 major coal-powered steel production plants operate in the U.S. 3 are in this region: Burns Harbor, Gary Works, and Indiana Harbor. We analyzed Environmental Protection Agency data and found these 3 Indiana mills emitted more industrial pollution than the combined toxic releases of the 4 similar mills in other states.
There's some irony to, steel built this town, and now what we're looking at is how steel made this town sick.
I mean, that's a stark reality that a lot of folks will have to deal with.
That's Gary's mayor, Eddie Melton. He wants tougher toxic emission standards. But how likely is that to happen? In March, the federal EPA announced it's considering lowering some standards polluters have to meet.
What we're seeing from the federal and state government concerns me in terms of rolling back the regulations on industries such as the steel industry.
Both the state and U.S. EPA declined interviews, but sent statements saying they take action when facilities are out of compliance, and that's reduced air emissions. Gary already fails to meet federal air quality standards. The county has more toxic releases than 99% of all other counties across the country.
We just fight. We just fight.
More than 76% of the people living in Gary are Black. The average income, less than $23,000. About a 4-hour drive from Gary, there's a steel plant in Middletown, Ohio. It's getting a major portion of a $500 million federal grant to change the steelmaking process and cut hazardous pollution in that city, which has an average income of $30,000 and it's 73% white. The Ohio plant was getting federal help to change its steelmaking process and cut pollution. Farrell believes Gary's demographics play a role in the pollution not getting cleaned up.
I am worthy. No matter what you think about my black skin, and I am a person worthy of a good life.
Cleveland Cliffs, which owns 2 of the plants in Northwest Indiana, has not returned our messages. The company also owns the Ohio plant we mentioned that's supposed to get the federal funds to make cleaner steel. But now we're learning that federal money may be rescinded.
Tara, such an eye-opening report. In your conversation with the mayor, I thought it was a really astute observation that you said the steel built the town and the steel is now making the town sick. It sounds like things might get even worse. Right now, the EPA is considering to lower the standards that polluters have to meet. But communities like Gary are already facing such high pollution. What can the community do here?
I'm really glad that you pointed that out because I think that line spoke to a lot of people in Gary, and it's a community that's already rallying there. Beryl and others have formed environmental groups to advocate for cleaner air and increased regulation. I've already connected with so many of them, and their next steps are to bring their concerns and what we found through our investigation to their lawmakers and representatives. Of course, that's something we'll continue to follow as we track this story in Gary.
Tara Molina with the powerful investigative reporting. Tara, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for joining me.
You're welcome, Bernie. Somebody's got a good feed on their YouTube.
Good algorithm.
Good evening, and thank you for being here. I never was interested in being known for having cancer. However, what's heartening about this journey is being a member and in partnership with G.A.R.D. And all of us have such an important role in this journey. And it's helpful, it's enlightening, it's uplifting, it's encouraging, and all those things that sometimes people who are diagnosed with cancer don't always feel. I've had more than 9 surgeries through the Rush University Cancer Center since 2016. And I still don't feel defeated. I'm humble and grateful that I can speak to you this evening. And that's primarily because we all make a difference, especially when we're fighting together. You know, in this political time, there are so many multifaceted approaches to just how we live our daily lives. And to be saddled with an issue of pollution, environmental pollution, it's really important that we keep talking about this. And it's really important that we keep fighting and we keep pushing, we keep struggling against EPA, who this administration thinks that we're not worthy of the kinds of clean environments that we're pushing and advocating for. That's so important. And as long as I'm breathing, because one of those tumors that they took out of my body was in my throat and in my tongue, and I wasn't expected to speak again. I was told by the doctor that you saw in that clip that we don't know if you have a tongue until we get in this surgery. We don't know if you'll be able to speak or if we can reconstruct your tongue. And I feel fortunate, I'm humble, I'm grateful that I could have tongue reconstruction. And again, we can trace this back. I never smoked a day in my life. When I went to the Cancer Institute and met Dr. Stinson, she said, usually we see people that have been used tobacco over half of their lifetime. I never smoked. I was never in a relationship with a person who smoked. And to be standing before you, battling diseases that primarily affect what they say are environmental pollution that's exacerbated by smoking. I never smoked recreational drugs either. I like to say that because this is ironic. And it's for my grandnieces, my nephews, and all the children, all the people that we love in G.A.R.D, that is heartening to partner with everybody. It's heartening to talk to people who are willing to lend a voice, lend their actions, lend their movement to pushing back on the federal administration and the state administration. I like to say about Indiana, we can do better. And I'm not a part of that group in the state government that thinks this way. We need to stop denying the science around this issue. Because at Rush that you saw, that Cancer Institute has decades, 30 plus years of data that say and talk about how the pollutants in this area affect our body. And it's okay for us to pay attention, and it's okay for us to love this city. I love this city. I love to wake up on Sunday mornings in this city and look out my window at my house. I want the city to be better and cleaner. And it shouldn't be that we're discounted primarily because our racial structure in this city has changed. Thank you for listening to me. I like this new tongue.
Thank you. Thank you so much, G.A.R.D. I told you all you would be different. told you, you'd be different. It's my pleasure now to bring Dr. Alan Helene and Susan Thomas to talk about how steel mill pollution affects our health. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I start, I'm going to just get a handout that I made. Yeah, thanks. Well, thank you very much for this opportunity. And Pastor Mac, it's great to see you again.
Thank you.
We met about a year and a half ago with Industrious Labs, and I was privileged to be part of this group of about 16 of us. And we learned about steel production, green steel production, something I'd never heard of before. And lots of things I learned during that session that extended over about 6 months. And one of them is that there are many diseases that are linked to air pollution and, in particular, pollution that come from our steel mills. So I'm going to review things here, and if you'll bear with me, I'm going to start off with a little history. Back in 1901, there was an attorney, a judge from Illinois, who was well respected, who was interested in bringing steel industry into the Midwest, and with the financial backing of J.P. Morgan, he founded U.S. Steel, and then he became the CEO of that organization for 26 years. 4 years later, G.A.R.D. Works was built, then the world's largest integrated primary steel mill, along with the adjacent model city named after him. Judge G.A.R.D. had this vision of modern steel making using cutting-edge technology, and this actually revolutionized steel production across the country and a big boost in economic growth here and nationwide. In the early years, Judge G.A.R.D. was a proponent of high ethical standards, and these were outlined in his so-called G.A.R.D. principles I found in a book on U.S. Steel. And I'm just going to quote some of these things that were in among his G.A.R.D. principles. He quotes, "If we succeed as businessmen, we must do it on principles that are honest, fair, lawful, and just. We must never forget that our rights and interests are and should be subservient to public welfare." Think about those words. They unfortunately fell short almost immediately. After construction of fine brick homes in the first district of G.A.R.D. for white executives and upper management, the poor planning and construction of substandard housing with redlining across the district forced immigrant and black laborers into the shoddy housing that was there with poor sanitation and rampant disease. And this is back in the very early stages. G.A.R.D. residents, when the factory was fully operational, soon recognized that there was going to be a trade-off with this industrial giant next door. Congestion, smoke, grime, horrible smells were tolerated because U.S. Steel provided necessary jobs. This trade-off continues to today. Industrial pollution was viewed as a nuisance, requiring frequent cleaning of the windows and frequent house painting because of corrosive fumes eroding the paint. Public awareness of health effects of pollution was also very limited, and health problems were basically ignored. Health experts were of very little help in the first half of that century, and they oftentimes said there were no links between environmental pollution and disease at all. It really wasn't until around the 1970s when there were several events that happened that really triggered environmental awareness and activism. Among them was a grease fire on the Grand Calumet River, and even more tragically, children drowning in a West G.A.R.D. lagoon filled with toxic waste. There were increasing calls for cleaning up the act, but as you can imagine, steel mills pushed back. 1971, U.S. Steel denied any link between pollution and human illness. They also curiously stated that there was no technology to solve this problem. That excuse probably worked back then, but 50 years later, it really rings hollow today. The medical community finally woke up slowly to the adverse effects from pollution from the steel industry. One of the earliest reports that I came across was in 1972, which confirmed a link between working near a coke plant and developing lung and kidney cancer. Today now, there are thousands, literally thousands of scientific peer-reviewed publications documenting the harm of air pollution, either causing illness, worsening the symptoms of illness, or increasing the mortality from many, many diseases. As members of the Green Steel Committee working with G.A.R.D, Susan Thomas, who is not here right now, but she and I put together this paper that we're presenting, Adverse Health Effects from Indiana's Integrated Primary Steel Mills, along with help from many other members of G.A.R.D in putting that together. This document focuses on the harmful effects of air pollution, primarily from studies that looked at fine particulate matter that is less than 2.5 microns in size, very tiny particles, so-called PM 2.5 is the abbreviation. Our purpose of presenting this paper is to actually raise awareness that adverse health effects from industrial pollution are far too common and extend beyond the lung. The handout I have put together shows you the organ systems, and it's not entirely complete. There are many of the things that I left off, among them tongue cancer. But basically the message is that air pollution affects pretty much every organ in the body. Each year, the 3 steel mills in Northwest Indiana release over 6,000 tons of this PM 2.5 into the air, and it ranks among the worst stationary sources of particulate matter in the United States. They are also leading emitters of other harmful chemicals, including nitrogen and sulfur oxides, heavy metals like lead, arsenic, volatile organic compounds, benzene, toluene, and a host of others. And this large group of chemicals known as air toxics, all hazardous to the health, and many of which are known carcinogens. In 2022, our 3 steel mills released 480 tons of these air toxics into the air that we breathe. Many harmful effects of pollution take years to develop, unlike asthma where the symptoms show up almost immediately. Many of the diseases like cancer and some of the other ones that I'll talk about take years, months, or years to develop. Many air pollutants are known carcinogens, which are absorbed into the deep areas of the lung. They get into the bloodstream, they travel through the body, and they enter into the tissues in the body where they cause inflammation, disrupt the immune system, cause DNA mutations, and can lead to cancer and other maladies. If you live near a steel mill, and somebody asks how close, usually it's within 2 to 3 miles, your risk of cancer is about 12% higher compared to the general population. If you live near a coke processing plant, that risk is 26% higher than in the general population. PM 2.5 is now linked to an increased risk of cancers in so many organs, and again, it's not a complete list, but brain, thyroid, breast, lung, head and neck cancer, stomach, liver, pancreas, colon, rectum, prostate, kidney, uterus, and ovary, and with bloodborne malignancies like leukemias. When we think about air pollution, we again think about the lungs as being the most common organ affected, and this is due to direct injury to the respiratory tract, which increases asthma symptoms, ER visits, and mortality from asthma. This is especially true in young children and those with underlying lung disease or chronic illnesses. Exposure to PM 2.5 increases cardiovascular problems like heart attacks, cardiac arrhythmias, heart failure, stroke, and sudden cardiac death. It's also associated with decreased fertility during pregnancy. Mothers exposed to air pollution have increased risk for intrauterine growth restriction, low birth weight infants, preeclampsia, preterm labor, and miscarriages. It exposes infants to higher risk for congenital heart defects and permanent cognitive damage. Air pollution is believed to play a key role in worsening of many neurologic diseases, such as cognitive decline, depression, anxiety, autism, Parkinson's, and Alzheimer's. The last group that I'm going to mention, and again, this is not complete, but is the group of autoimmune diseases. As I said, these pollutants can stimulate and alter the immune system, and it can cause significant damage, and it's associated with increased risk for rheumatoid arthritis, systemic lupus, inflammatory bowel disease like Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. As a gastroenterologist, I saw much of that. Multiple sclerosis, diabetes, both type 1 and type 2. With improved air quality monitoring, more stringent regulation of emissions, there have been improvements over the decades, but significant problems remain. What's really concerning is that more recent literature suggests that what levels are deemed to be safe by the EPA actually are not that safe. And particularly they're unsafe for marginalized communities, those with underlying medical conditions and chronic illnesses. Over the past 3 years, Cliffs and U.S. Steel have been 90 to 100% non-compliant with EPA standards and have had 55 enforcement actions against them with fines of $1.1 million. I was thinking about looking up what their profits are over that period of time, but those fines are paltry and basically are looked at as a cost of doing business. Current environmental laws need to be improved and strengthened, not weakened or ignored as they are going to be. Recognizing that there are many sources of particulate matter, such as Canadian wildfires and heavy truck and train and automobile traffic in our area, polluting blast furnaces at our steel mills are a major source. And most importantly, there's something we can fix, and we're going to hear more about that in a little bit. Quavinet's going to talk about that. Such a transition would go a long way to improve economic viability of our steel mills and health of our communities. We demand a future with clean, sustainable steelmaking that keeps our jobs and communities safe. EPA's decision to delay critical rules designed to protect us from toxic emissions perpetuates the unfortunate trend of treating the region as a toxic sacrifice zone. Judge Gary's early vision of forming a large steel industry where corporate interests remain subservient to the public interest fell dismally short, as I mentioned. It's time to begin a new era. We demand that U.S. Steel and Cliffs do the right thing, make an investment and switch to green steel production and stop this assault on our communities. And with that, I'm going to say thanks for your attention, and I'll be happy to answer questions later.
Thank you so much, Dr. Helene. You know, that's the reason I became an environmentalist. And I used to joke a lot of times. I served as chair of the Environmental Justice Committee for the NAACP. And I would joke how in rooms of black people, I was the only environmentalist. Or in a room full of environmentalists, I was the only black person, and then in a room full of black people, I was usually the only environmentalist. And I found myself sharing lots of times, while I love Carter blue butterflies and the spotted turtles just as much as anybody else, I too have had that spiritual experience when you hug a tree. The reason I became an environmentalist was because of children with asthma. Those disproportionately affected were black. Neighborhoods like mine where I remember the house I grew up on, it was all steel workers, and my friends lost their mothers at very young ages to all types of cancers and heart attacks. So when we connect our environment and our environmental stewardship to people and public health, I think that's when we begin to, our message begins to resonate with so many more people. So thank you, Dr. Helene, for laying those out so plainly, reminding me of why I got into the environmental justice fight. And I know you all didn't come here just to hear how we lose, right? You came to hear what we need to do to win, how we make things better. So it is my pleasure to bring up my good friend, Kwabena Razuli, who's going to talk about modernizing the steel industry and how that can improve our health and save jobs. I'm going to joke on him for a second. I had to make the comment too, because we've been knowing each other a long time. It's probably 30 years now. Even though he's significantly older than I am. But glad to be doing this with you. Welcome.
Thank you, Lori. Lori was in high school in this thing called Project Seed, where children who were having struggles had to come for a week.
I have one bad experience.
No, she was at Emerson, so they had to hook up with volunteers, so she came and I was presenting. I think I was working at NIP school at the time. But unlike Lori, in terms of being around other environmentalists, I'm fortunate enough to be in a group called the National Society of Black Engineers, NSBE, that I joined when I was at Southern University. And they had an environmental justice special interest group. And I wasn't working with them at the time. I was working with the International Committee, but a lot of my comrades and friends were part of the EJC. And later I started working with them, and I worked with environmental justice groups. So there was a bunch of them, really sharp, really just dynamic people in that. And I just saw a documentary film over at the Aquatorium that's part of the G.A.R.D International Black Film Festival that kicked off today. And it was called Harm in the Water, I think that was the title of it. And it dealt with Cancer Alley and was taking place on the Mississippi River. And I would recommend that people check out that documentary when you get a chance, because it's almost like, it's pretty sad. Think about one of my classmates that we did design project, and I don't think about her often, but that made me think about Catherine Asbury was her name. Lived in Plaquemine, right across the Mississippi River, where Dow Chemical, I think, was, and she was cousins of the Pierre brothers, these twins that were like the smartest dudes, and we would be in there trying to study and figure out what we were doing, and they would be out there helping everybody. And she was our first cousin. So anyway, but yeah, Catherine, after we graduated, it was about 3 or 4 years later that she was gone. Cancer took her away. She was married with children and everything, but think about Catherine, made me think about her today. I want to share some information about Green Steel, compiled by the Green Steel Committee, G.A.R.D. This is just beautiful work that we're doing in G.A.R.D. and making a difference, really making a difference. But people once said that pollution is the price you pay for a good job, and that's no longer true. Modern steel-making technology is much cleaner, greener, more efficient, and more cost-effective than the technology of Northwest Indiana steel mills have been using for over 100 years, for the last 100 years, for over 100 years actually now. Modernizing the iron and steel-making technology that our region's integrated mills use will greatly reduce the air pollution that causes so much harm to our community and environment and our community's health that was just shared with us. It will also help to ensure that the steel industry and the jobs that it creates will remain in our region and not move elsewhere. And it will help the urban revitalization efforts of G.A.R.D. and other communities. Again, you just heard about the air pollution from our local steel mills, how harmful it is to our community's health. Most of the air pollution comes from old technology that is rapidly becoming obsolete, especially the blast furnaces that the steel mills use to make iron from iron ore. Blast furnaces are a coal-based technology, and they produce most of the air pollution that we're experiencing. There are only 14 blast furnaces still operating in the U.S. 9 of them are in Northwest Indiana. Only 14, and 9 of them right here in Northwest Indiana. Blast furnaces have not changed much over the past 100 years. The country's newest blast furnace was built in 1980, a little less than 50 years ago. And no new blast furnaces will ever again be built in the U.S. or any other highly developed country. That's because the new technology is now available, which is much less polluting and more efficient than the blast furnaces. That modern technology is called direct reduction, or simply DR. 20% of the iron now being produced in the U.S. is made by direct reduction. Over the next 20 years or so, DR iron will gradually replace the pig iron that's produced in the country's blast furnaces. And when that happens, the U.S. blast furnace will become obsolete. And any integrated iron and steel mill, like those right here in Northwest Indiana, that do not replace their blast furnaces with DR furnaces will also become obsolete. The direct reduction process has many advantages. DR furnaces currently use natural gas, which is both less polluting and less costly than using coal or coke. They operate at a lower temperature and are so much more energy efficient. They reduce a steel mill's carbon dioxide emissions by around a half, and they release much less hazardous air emissions. A direct reduction furnace can easily be converted from using natural gas to using hydrogen as green technology becomes increasingly available and affordable. This will make it very clean and very green. The iron a DR furnace produces can be used to make all of the steel products that the Northwest Indiana integrated iron and steel mills now make. Today, the steel mills in Northwest Indiana are the country's leading producers of high-value flat-rolled steel products. If our region's mills fail to modernize their iron-making technologies, an increasing percentage of the country's iron will be produced elsewhere. And if an increasing percentage of the country's iron is produced elsewhere, then the high-value flat-rolled steel products that Northwest Indiana now produces will also be produced elsewhere. At that point, Northwest Indiana's integrated steel will no longer be competitive and they will most likely shut down. U.S. Steel Nippon has said that it plans to reline Gary's largest blast furnace, BF-14, in 2026. U.S. Steel also said it is building a next-generation, highly sustainable and technologically advanced steel mill in Arkansas, and that this new steel mill will use direct reduction iron technology. Blast furnaces, they must be relined every 15 years or so. If BF-14 or any other of the local blast furnaces are realigned, most likely it will be their last realignment. Not realignment, the last time they'll be realigned. If our steel mills do not invest in modern DR iron making technology, soon enough, the steel products that they now make will be produced elsewhere. And they will almost certainly be shut down by sometime in the early to mid-2040s. When this happens, Gary and communities around it will be saddled with many miles of abandoned and polluted steel mill properties along the lake, one of our community's most valuable assets. There's still time to modernize Northwest Indiana's integrated iron and steel mills. They can still maintain their strong position as leaders in the market for high-value flat-rolled steel products into the long-term future. The key to making this happen, however, is an early decision to replace the mill's blast furnaces with DR furnaces. The modernization of the region's steel mills will not be cheap, however. Replacing Gary Works blast furnaces capacity with DR capacity, together with other investments that will be necessary to accommodate the change, will cost around $2.5 billion. But this is an investment that is worth it, that is well worth it. Northwest Indiana has everything it needs to compete with and to outcompete iron-making and steel-making facilities in other regions. We already have a skilled workforce with a strong work culture. The infrastructure, the sourcing, the warehousing, the distribution facilities are already in place. We are well connected to the transportation networks that reach steel customers. The mills came to Northwest Indiana in the early 1900s. They were built on what was then a wilderness of sand dunes and marshlands away from populated areas. We're a quarter of the way in now to the 21st century. Technological advances have made clean and green steel making an achievable reality. The residents of Northwest Indiana have endured the consequences of dirty steel making for more than 100 years. And like you said during your presentation and on the video, we're worthy. We're worthy of this advance in technology to be used. The time has now come for us to reap the benefits of the new technologies that will give us cleaner and greener steel making. Thank you.
All right.
All right, at this time, Carolyn McCready will join me. I know you have questions, or some of you may have answers, but we're going to open the floor for those now.
Or comments? Something perhaps that was not mentioned.
Does the Does the greener process compromise the quality of the steel that's being produced?
You said in your remarks, absolutely not, it's the same.
No, I mean, you can make, I mean, there's different ways that you can install DR technology. One of the ways is the DR iron that comes out of the DR furnaces, it's not as hot as a blast furnaces, doesn't come out in a molten form, it comes out in a spongy iron form. So you can put in an electric melting furnace and then feed it right into the existing basic oxygen furnace, and then everything else goes downstream just the same. So that's one way to do it. Or another way to do it is to also put in electric arc furnaces, get rid of the BOF, and go from, that will take a little bit more engineering, but in the long term it may be cheaper. So we're not telling US Steel or Cleveland Cliffs which way to do it. There's more than one way that can be done. But there's no question that every steel product that's now being made can be made, and there's no question that many other facilities and companies are now starting to make the products that we make. And they need iron to do it, and they're getting more and more dependent on direct reduced iron. That's the trend. And if we don't do it, then we're just gonna make less and less steel here in Northwest Indiana.
Thank you. Thanks. Good question.
Yeah, my name's Terry Siegel, and I'm a retired steelworker. And you know, for years we heard the steel industry complain that they don't have the money to put the pollution devices on the different parts of the steel mill and things like this. And I think we're in a whole different scenario, because I think one thing, G.A.R.D has made the case for upgrading what needs to be done for the future, if we're going to have a future that lasts at least another 100 years. So if we realize what happened, and when Nippon was able to purchase US Steel, they had to make some commitments. And one of those commitments was to invest $3.1 billion in Gary Works. Now, they've already committed $300 million to increase the longevity of the blast furnace. They've committed $200 million to revise the hot strip mill with some modifications to upgrade it, and that still leaves us $2.6 billion. And from G.A.R.D's analysis, well, from what I hear, it's about 2.5 to institute the changes we need to clean up our community and our neighborhoods, and also the environment for the workers. And along with that, something we need to recognize too, along with what Nippon agreed to do, was they agreed to build a greenfield plant, and they committed $4 billion to the greenfield plant. And I would tell Nippon, we have a beautiful brownfield in Gary that they can build that new $4 billion steel mill in. And that's what needs to take place. So they got the money, it's just, are they committed to the community? And that's what we need. Because we all suffer. There's no environmental dome over US Steel. It goes for miles and miles on the impact of our community. So you guys are doing a great job. Keep it up.
Thank you, Terry. Anyone else? Does anyone else have a story that they would like to tell?
All right, well, good evening. My name is Monica Dumas. I am here with Industrious Lab. It's good to see a lot of my colleagues. But I'm here on behalf of, I'm an advocate for my mom. She retired from US Steel, 32 years at the steel mill, and she worked in the blast furnace. So my mom now has dementia. This is her 4th year with dementia. I try not to get emotional, because when my mom worked, her brain was sharp. Like, she could balance her checkbook. Before we went in the bank on 11th Avenue, whatever that bank was, Gaynor, she knew, I'm gonna give this woman my check, We're gonna come out with $12.56. Don't y'all ask for nothing else in this store. But now my mom barely knows who I am. And I agree, the steel mill gave us a great life. And my sister and I, we needed nothing. My dad also worked in the steel mill. He passed away when I was 13 from a brain aneurysm that erupted. It's hard. It's hard to see your mom suffer. But in the same token, I have great memories from we lived right here on 9th Avenue next to West Side football field. We just sold her house 2 years ago. And we don't even drive down the street anymore because it's hard. Our families had a good life, you know? But we need to do better. And I've moved out of the area. I've been in Portage for 8 years. And because I have a daughter, and she was starting to have some type of medical, and I knew it was because of the air quality. I knew things were changing. We're not that far, but we're not affected directly, but you can see the difference. When I get on the expressway coming from east to west, you can see the difference. My church is still in Gary, and there's a lot of children that suffer from either asthma or we have eczema, we have and I didn't even know this, Alan, thank you, but there's so many complications we have in life, and we just think it's normal until you go somewhere else and it's not. So I am with G.A.R.D. I am going to fight as much as I can fight. I'm going to speak up, because if my mother had a voice, guess what? She'd be here fighting too. So we're going to fight for a change. We deserve a change, the black and brown communities. The children deserve to be outside. They deserve to be able to play. You go to the Railcat Stadium, that's an amazing stadium, but the neighborhood around it, you don't see many children outside playing because of but you can see it in the sky, you can see it in the air. So, again, I do talk a lot, so I'm not going to talk as much, but I'm going to advocate for Irene Dumas, that's my mother's name, because she worked hard. But I didn't know until I got older why she wouldn't, you know how you have to bring your kid to work day? I'm like, Mom, why can't we ever go to work with you? She was like, well, first of all, it's a steel mill, so we don't say that. And second of all, it's dirty. She never wore her greens home. She always would leave them wherever. But the ones she took in was sharp. She would wash them and iron them and crease them, but we never saw them return. But when she blew her nose, it was black. When she coughed up, it was black. But I didn't know. And now, as a grown woman, I know what she went through to provide for us. And if I can help somebody else, because my kid is in college and she's doing good, God is amazing, so we're good, right? But somebody else needs to make sure their kid can play and their grandkid can come outside and that it's safe. We don't mind the money, but we need the health to go with the money. And so that's it. So I do comedy. I usually drop mics, but I don't want to drop this mic because we're in the church. So God bless you. I'll pass it.
Thank you so much. And this is a state-of-the-art sound system.
Yeah, nice.
I'm amazed. Thank you, Pastor Mac. This is much better than what we got at City Hall.
I have a question for Dr. Helene. What do you say to people who say you can't prove the connection between what happened to me, my mother's dementia, my tongue cancer? How do you know it came from a steel mill? Because that's, I think, how they keep getting away with this is we can't say, oh, it happened because of X, Y, and Z. You can't prove it. So what do we say to people?
Valerie, that's an excellent question, and I'm not sure I have a really good answer. We were at a meeting, and I asked our attorneys that were there. I have all these articles. I could stack articles 10 feet high talking about all the effects of pollution. One of the things that the steel mills will say, what about the Canadian fires? That's PM 2.5 that comes across. We all saw it for weeks here. What about all the trucks and traffic on I-80, 94? That produces particulate matter. The fact is that we know statistically being exposed to PM 2.5 causes a significant, now maybe when I say significant, sometimes it's only a 5% increased risk of a cancer. One of the other things, as a retired gastroenterologist, and I mentioned this in my graduation talk, we're seeing a trend in cancers now moving to younger and younger people. I've diagnosed colon cancers in people in their 20s. It's with no family history of that. And it's devastating when you talk to a 20-something-year-old who's just starting out their life. And the literature is showing that it's increasing in younger and younger age groups for about 10 or 12 different cancers. They're occurring at a younger and younger age. And air pollution is absolutely one of those factors that it's considered. But finding the proof is really challenging. You will see that there are lawsuits about mesothelioma from asbestos, and that was related to some of the work in steel mills. And you can prove it when they worked at this steel mill, and in their biopsies, you can find the little fibers of asbestos in their lungs. And you can make this connection, and the steel mill can't walk away from that. But they will claim that this pollution, how do you know it was from me and not the trucks that are driving down the road? And so that's a real dilemma there to prove that. The real way to prove it is shut down the steel mills or switch over and then look at what happens to the ratio or rates of cancers. Those kind of studies take decades and decades. We don't have the time to do that. So I don't have an answer for how to prove that and in a court of law and make changes happen.
Thank you, Dr. Allen. I just wanted to point out that at Rush University, the Cancer Institute, thank you, the person that you saw on the tape, Dr. Stinson, Kirsten Stinson, is head of the department, chair of the department, which the Research Institute, they have absolutely been concentrating and they've been announcing some of the findings for a lot of years. They worked with OSHA, they worked with Dr. Peter Orris and research scientists who've also been in the movement of pushing back on environmental issues. And they've started to open up the Research Institute at the Cancer Center at Rush. I was educated and still being educated because I went in thinking I'm trained as a public health person. And I went in thinking that, well, I'll volunteer for a couple of research studies because Black women are absolutely underrepresented nationally and locally in research studies. So I went in and said, well, maybe you can use my old blood. and it's been a wonderful education process with being part of those 3 research studies that I'm involved in. And so Dr. Stinson and this CBS segment actually has 6 different segments. And in one of the segments, they talk about some of the information, and they've been able to share numerous papers, findings with the American Public Health Association. That's 156 years old. And there are sections within that organization. So I'm just saying, and if I name some of the names, Doctor, I know you would know some of those people who are involved in this process. So I do think, and it seems to be in environmental justice, that there are legal teams, if that's a part of what we're talking about, but there is information available. And in one of those CBS segments, there's a chair, another chair of the research department that talked about legal teams and other people nationally and internationally that are working on this project. And Rush announce that they don't care about the federal regulations, because as most of you know, Rush University, they got money. They got money to fund a lot of these things. So I'm just suggesting that that might be a resource in terms of our advocacy work available to us.
And
Thank you.
Can I just say one thing as a follow-up to that? Yeah.
Here. Thank you.
I just want to add one thing to that. Another group that I've worked with in addition to G.A.R.D. is I've connected up with a researcher from Purdue University, Ellen Wells, who has an NIH study that I'm one of the so-called community ambassadors, trying to recruit people who live in the communities, the collar communities, or right around the fence line communities. They're trying to bring a closer association between health effects and what pollutants are actually found in their house. These studies that I mentioned, the thousands and thousands, are done across broad populations exposed to broad, health, pollutants that are in the area. But this study now is going to collect soil, water, air sample, and dust from the home and test for a whole bunch of pollutants inside the home. And then those individuals will go in to the second part of the study and they'll collect a lot of biologic information like some hair clippings, toenail clippings, saliva. They'll do a study on an iPad looking for any kind of neurologic or other problem. And what they're trying to do is bring that link closer at the very granular level of the household and finding, we found increased arsenic really close, but people who live right around the steel mill here. And then we see that it's less and less as you move further away. And then you can draw an arrow to the steel mill and say, we're finding this pollutant, this increase in disease. But those studies take years and years to do. But right now, we just have to fight that battle.
Hi, I'm Connie Wachala, and I'm part of the Green Steel Cohort.
The mic's not working out.
Flip switch.
Push it up a bit.
Hi. I'm Connie Wachala, and I was part of the Sustainable Steel Cohort with Monica and Pastor Matt and Dr. Kelly. My family has been decimated by cancer. My extended family, we were all living along the Lake Michigan shoreline from Chicago to G.A.R.D. 8 of my cousins have died of cancer. My son had cancer when he was 21. He survived, but a colleague's 4-year-old son died of leukemia. There was a lot of suffering, as we heard here. But I also wanted to say that as part of the Sustainable Steel Cohort, I did some research as part of my steel story, and Dr. Hilling mentioned that if the steel mill closed down, you might be able to see a result in health, an increase in health outcomes. Well, there was such a study, a New York University study, reported that a week after a Coke plant in Pittsburgh closed down, and this is about heart health, cardiovascular ER visits dropped by 42% 1 week after a Coke plant closed. And those benefits continued. So after 3 years, the number of cardiovascular visits was 61% lower than expected. So, that's pretty powerful proof. I also wanted to ask Carolyn if we could celebrate. Did we have an EPA win recently with
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to talk about that?
Well, I don't know if I could call up all the details, but it had something to do with, a lot of us spoke at the EPA hearing. So I want to say, we did it. And you guys at G.A.R.D are just like doing such wonderful work. Thank you. But as far as I can recall, it was that the steel mills were asking to delay some lower pollution level rules that the EPA had passed in the Biden administration. So EPA was going to go along with that, and we just insisted that they can't do that. Although I remember the steel executives being in on that hearing and saying they can't afford to do these changes now. And they were insisting that we follow the science, and that those rules didn't need to be implemented. So the EPA ruled in our favor.
Great.
Yeah.
That happened last week, and yes, Jen.
Yeah, thanks. I wanted to respond to the question about how you can prove the effect. But in terms of the recent EPA ruling, it unfortunately was not quite as good as that. There were two different rules that were adopted in 2024. There was a new coke oven rule, and there was a revised integrated iron and steel manufacturing rule. And the EPA, completely to all of our surprise, originally the EPA, at the instructions of President Trump, put a waiver on the implementation of 8 different new rules. There was a hearing. There were a hearing on both the coke oven rules and a hearing on the iron and steel rules. And to all of our surprise, the EPA turned around and is now going to implement the 2024 coke oven rules. And that's very important, particularly because both Burns Harbor and Indiana Harbor run coke ovens. And it's especially important in the Mon Valley, where the Clairton Works is just the hugest concentration of coke ovens. However, several G.A.R.D members, including in this room, testified during the hearing on the integrated iron and steel bill. And the new regulations were very modest, but very important, because they regulated things that were not previously regulated. Basically, they call it intermittent and fugitive emissions, and there's a whole number of them. They're very important, significant source, and they've never been regulated. That, unfortunately, has not been put back down. But to the question about how you can prove things, this discussion has been going on at least since the tobacco industry came under pressure. This is not a new discussion. The tobacco industry bought years and years before the government anybody could say, yes, tobacco causes cancer. It took decades to be able to say tobacco causes cancer, because any health effect is statistical. These are always statisticals. So there's no question that increased exposure, as you breathe it in, or you touch the ground that it fell out on and put your hand in your mouth, increased exposure to fine particulate matter increases occurrences of many different diseases, as Dr. And so it only increases the likelihood that you're going to get tongue cancer by 5%, and colon cancer by 5%, and pancreatic cancer. These things add up. And there's no question. Now, the 3 mills in Northwest Indiana together emit 6 100,000 tons, not pounds, tons, that's how many millions of pounds of PM 2.5 in the air every year. If you look at the EPA's, the latest data they have published was 2022. If you look at the 2022 data, the second, sixth, and seventh largest stationary sources of PM2.5 are those three mills. Number two, both Indiana Harbor and Burns Harbor are bigger than Gary because they run coke ovens as well as, but the coke ovens feed, you need coke ovens to have blast furnaces. The coke ovens feed the blast furnaces. Those are the number 2, number 6, and number 7 largest sources of PM2.5 in the country. No other major sources are even near each other. So this is huge. You know, just as, you know, there are other sources of PM2.5, but if we're in a community that has the largest stationary sources and such huge amounts of these things, we don't have to prove that every single cancer, every single lung disease, we just know, and so we can continue making these cases and making these arguments, but there's plenty of evidence. And one last thing, I know I'm talking too long, but I get worked up about these issues. There used to be a notion of best available technology. When people said to the steel companies 50 years ago, you're too polluting, they say, well, we need the steel, we need the iron, there's no other way of doing it. We have to put up with it because the economy demands it. But when newer technology becomes available that can do the same thing in a cleaner way, and it just happens to be, now in some countries, because of the price of natural gas, it may even cost extra to make steel with direct reduction rather than with a blast furnace. In the United States, we have pretty cheap natural gas, which means in the United States, it's even cheaper in most cases to convert to DR. So you have a better technology, it's available, it's efficient, and that's the question. Can't we make the case to our political representatives, the steel mills, everybody else, that the time, we were not living in the early part of the 19th century, 20th century, we're not living into in 1970, we're living in the 21st century. Let's get cleaner steel. Thanks.
And we don't need coke plants.
It is 7:15, and are there any other questions or comments?
I have a comment.
Yes.
So my name is, know a lot of people in this room. My name is Mike Olis. I work with the group called Mighty Earth, which is allied with everybody here on sustainable steel production. And one quick comment, if you think about climate change also, this would solve, if we convert Indiana to sustainable steel, we would reduce our global climate change gases by about 1%, just by taking action here. And about new jobs, we'll create new jobs instead of lose jobs if we go this way. So we're talking win-win-win-win. There's a couple of opportunities, I think, coming up very quickly about how we take this conversation out of this awesome church. I love Reverend Mack, who worshiped here a couple weeks ago and felt the Spirit and feel the Spirit tonight. On Thursday, down in Indianapolis and on Zoom, there's going to be a hearing that got canceled because I think they got mad at us last time for being rude about how awful they were when it comes to protecting our clean air in Northwest Indiana. So on Zoom, I think it's at 12:30 or 1:30, there's going to be a public hearing about the NOx pollution rules. And we can get people signed up in a line for that. If we can get anybody from Northwest Indiana to Indianapolis, I'll drive up, whatever it takes, to get people there. We can have a press conference, I think, at Central Indiana News, and have that be part of the Central Indiana News cycle, which people downstate have no idea what's going on up here, and we're a divided state. I think that would help bring together a vision for how we heal the state. Now, we love Northwest Indiana because we steal all your tax money, but you know, yeah, it's like we colonize Northwest Indiana to run our state government, and then obviously the pollution and then Two other quick things. On Saturday night, I think in Gary, there is a TED Talk series. Has anybody seen this? TEDx in Gary? One of the speakers is named Robert Ordway. Does anybody know him? He wants to be the J.D. Vance of Indiana. Seriously, like he's writing a book in the style of J.D. Vance. But he says he cares about green steel and sustainable steel. And if we could be there on Saturday and hold him accountable to his awards, he works for Governor Mike Braun. He works in the Republican world. We had 2 Republicans at both Banks and Young, their representatives, at the press conference on Tuesday. That's somebody who could be an ally to us or a bridge to us.
He lives in Miller.
He lives in Miller. Okay, so you represent him on the city council, right? Okay.
That's not this Saturday, is it?
I think it's the 18th. Is that no? Yeah, so it's that week from Saturday, then, right? Yeah, a week from Saturday. And then lastly, in December, the Indiana Economic Development Corporation is having their annual meeting downtown. In Indianapolis at the Fashion Mall. Have you ever been to the Fashion Mall in Indianapolis? It's a very, very swanky place. And so I think we're trying to think, well, how do we? The Indiana Economic Development Corporation has spent billions of dollars on some very dubious projects, and on some projects that have self-enriched their members. And so we're like, well, why don't we work together then to use this vision for economic development to redevelop steel in Indiana and save our #1 industry. So those are some things coming up that would love to keep the conversation going on and be able to work together with everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia. I just want to say that this effort to move forward, we really can use the allies that are here tonight to support moving toward a transition to cleaner, greener steel at our steel mills. But in the meantime, we also want them to do better right now. And we have some wonderful allies in Carrie Kitaki here from the Environmental Law and Policy Center, and also the Conservation Law Center, who helps out tremendously when permits come up for these facilities, where we really push them to do better within the context of what's required of them, but they can do better within that context, and to do better monitoring, better maintenance, better management to reduce their accidents and their, the big plumes that shoot up in the air, and when they have, environmental accidents, they can do better. That doesn't have to happen. And so we are watching them now and monitoring them now and trying to make sure that until such time that we can move the steel mills and our agencies to push for these greener opportunities and technologies. Day by day, we're watching and making sure that they do, or trying to make sure that they do the best that they possibly can. So we can use your assistance in that as well, pushing for better operations now for the people who live here now, and of course for the people who are coming up. Thank you.
I just want to say how important environmental law and policy and Conservation Law Center is to the area here, because they take these 1,000-page legal regulations and get them down to a point where they're in layman terms where we can actually understand them a little bit. It makes some arguments to support our community and protect our rights. So thank you.
Yeah.
All right. You had a question?
Well, just a quick statement. I want to give some love to Pastor Matt for allowing us to be here. But we're part of our outreach committee of G.A.R.D. A few of us in here are part of outreach committee of G.A.R.D. And I think this is so very important that we get to the community even more, and maybe even kind of get with the organization of pastors on the interfaith or other organizations, so we can spread this information more to the community. So I think that's so very important, and we'll have to work on that. I just want to share and thank you again.
No problem.
I just had go ahead.
Just like one other quick comment. Can we take a group picture before we leave tonight with their signs?
Yes. A few more things we would like to happen.
Yeah, okay.
Lori,
My question is, when do we eat?
Yeah, yes, well, that's what I was gonna talk about. Okay, that's a good thing. So what you've experienced tonight is hopefully going to start happening all around the city. We have, our outreach committee has a plan to hold meetings everywhere around the city to organize groups of people. And so what we want to do is organize the community sentiment around this whole issue of health and how we can make this change. And so one of the ways that we can do that is to have a public face of what we want. And we have 100 of these signs. If you look back here, green steel equals cleaner air. And we are asking each one of you to take a sign home with you and put it in your yard. Okay? And because these signs can be your voice when you're asleep, when you're at work. You know, people see these signs and they're a reason to talk. And people might ask you, well, you know, what does that mean? And then because you've been at this meeting, you can give, you know, an explanation of why you have it in your yard. So I'm hoping that everyone who is here will take a sign, put it in your yard, and also contact GA.R.D. If your neighbors want signs, and we will deliver them. Okay? So did everyone in here sign up on our supporter list? Yeah? Everyone did? Ms. Dumas? Yes. You did? Okay, good. Good. We are also looking for people who want to join our outreach committee because we have a lot of people to talk to, and so we're going to need more people that will be able to join us in this effort. So please keep that in mind. And yes, my dear, we are getting ready to eat. Jenny Redham has brought us some wonderful food. It's downstairs, and so we're going to go down there if you want. We're hoping that you will join us and have a little sandwich and sandwiches and from Subway. Well, that's good stuff, right? So this is how we're going to celebrate all being together. And Pastor, I just want to thank you so much for allowing us to be here. And this is like, you know, you're like your own TV network, right? I mean, he has been filming all of this, and it's going out on. You want to tell us what your media schedule is?
We're streaming live on our church's Facebook page, our YouTube channel, our website, and our very own Roku channel.
Oh my goodness. So you're in the right place. This is the right place to have our maiden voyage. And I want to thank everyone very much for coming out tonight. And we're going to get bigger, and the next time we're here, we're going to fill the place up because people will want to be part of this kind of change. People will want to do it. And that's what it's going to take. It's going to take us putting pressure on our elected officials. We have a whole campaign also that will make the business case to business people about why this makes sense business-wise. And so we're also putting together a PowerPoint on what the transition to green steel would look like, or could look like. There is no one way, but nonetheless it's a transition because you just can't go out and order, a DR furnace from Amazon and they deliver it the next day. Then you're making green steel. Don't work like that. There's a whole re-engineering process that has to happen. And so we are talking about future, but not way in the future. If we don't take action now, we're going to lose everything that we have on our lakefront. And we don't need that. And the city of Gary does not need that. We may not be getting our fair share of taxes from U.S. Steel, but without without that steel mill, we wouldn't get anything. And that is not what the city of Gary deserves after being the mother of this region for over 100 years. So,
That's right.
so thank you very much, everyone, and let's go downstairs and